We've been looking at the subject of growing in Christlikeness from Matthew chapter 5, chapter 6, and chapter 7, because everything written here is really the life of Jesus that he wants to share with us. Remember that we cannot imitate and produce this life. There's a lot of difference between imitating the life of Christ, and that is a danger that we all face, and partaking of his nature. Imitating his life would be like getting fruit from the market, and beautiful fruit, and hanging it on our barren tree. Whereas partaking of his life is where the fruit comes out from the tree itself. So that's a very subtle danger, and we have to be always aware of it. I need to partake of his nature, and if you recognize that, you will always seek to be filled with the Holy Spirit. Because the standard is so high here in these chapters, in the 9 right attitudes, and we've seen already 8 wrong attitudes. So we want to now look at Matthew chapter 7 and verse 1, which is the 9th wrong attitude, which is judging others. Now, whenever a Christian sincerely seeks to live by the standards mentioned in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, seeking to pursue those 9 right attitudes and avoiding all these 8 wrong attitudes that we have considered so far, the standard of his life is going to be so much better than the lives of average Christians around him, that there'll be a tremendous temptation in him to judge them. And that's why the Lord concludes with this wrong attitude finally. Once you've come into this wonderful life described in Matthew 5 and 6, be careful that you don't judge others. That's not your calling. God is the only one who's a judge of others. It's amazing that Jesus said these words in John chapter 8. When we seek to follow Jesus' example, listen to his words, John 8:15. Do you know this verse? You judge, he was talking to the Pharisees, verse 13, the Pharisees, John 8:15. You judge according to the flesh. Did he say, I judge according to the Spirit? No. He says, I'm not judging anyone. Amazing statement from the one who had every right to judge others, whose life was so pure and holy that if he judged, and like he says in the next verse, even if I do judge, my judgment will be true. It'll be accurate, because I'm always one with the Father in my judgment. But I do not judge anyone. I'm not judging anyone. Now, we need to see the command, do not judge others, from the life of Jesus. Did he judge the Pharisees? He exposed the Pharisees very severely, and he spoke words of condemnation on them because he was the Son of God. And it's right for us to expose false teachers and false prophets and anyone who's seeking to lead Christians astray, deceivers. So to do not judge does not mean do not discern. It's very important to discern between good and evil. Let me show you this verse in Philippians in chapter 1 so that we have a balanced understanding of this. In Philippians chapter 1, he's talking about growing in love. And love is the greatest virtue. And it says here in Philippians 1 verse 9, I pray that your love will abound, increase more and more, still more and more, in real knowledge and discernment. So one of the marks of coming to a higher degree of love is that you discern. And it is only the one whose heart is filled with love who can discern properly. If I'm not pursuing after love, my discernment will be wrong. It'll be based on my own assessment and my own understanding and my own preferences and prejudices. So I have to begin with increasing and abounding in love more and more, and then God will give me accurate discernment. And so I'm still not here to judge people, but I must discern. I must avoid people who are, particularly if you have a responsibility, you have to discern people. So where does this line of judging end? I mean, let's think of, are we never supposed to judge any situation? I believe it depends on whether you have authority in a situation. See, Paul says to the Corinthian church in 1 Corinthians 5, when he tells them to put a certain man who's lived in sin out of the church. Put him out of the church, he says. And then he says in 1 Corinthians 5 and verse 12, what do I have to do with judging outsiders? I'm not here to judge all those worldly people, but don't you judge those who are within the church? Yes, the elders have a right to judge those who are within the church. Those who are outside, God will judge them. But God gives the responsibility to elders to judge within the church. And he gives the responsibility to fathers to judge their own children. You see, if two of your children have a disagreement or a conflict and they come to you, you can't say, I won't judge. If you're a father or a mother, you have to judge there. So judging is in the sphere in which God has given you responsibility. That's important, and I should not try to escape that responsibility to judge within that sphere. And if you're an elder in a church, you're called to exercise judgment there based on a discernment that has come out of love for your flock. That's very important. For example, if you're working in an office or a factory and you've got responsibility there as the manager or something like that, you have to exercise judgment. Otherwise, you will not be fulfilling your responsibility. So we need to understand what this means. But outside that sphere, I'm not called to judge anybody. Paul was very strict in exercising judgment over the churches he had responsibility for. He spoke some strong words to people. He called certain people carnal and not spiritual. So just keep that in mind as when we think of this word. The other thing I want to show you is from Isaiah and chapter 11, where we read that Jesus said he would not judge. But we read in Isaiah chapter 11 how he did judge. And Isaiah chapter 11, we read of the Spirit of the Lord, verse 2, resting upon Jesus. It's a prophetic reference to Christ. The spirit of wisdom, understanding, counsel, strength, and knowledge, and the fear of the Lord, or reverence for the Lord. The Holy Spirit, it says here, this is the sevenfold spirit mentioned in Revelation. Wisdom, the spirit of the Lord, wisdom, understanding, counsel, strength, knowledge, and reverence for the Lord. So one mark of reverence for the Lord, if he delights, it says here in verse 3, one of these 7 qualifications is highlighted, and it says the fear of the Lord. And it says here that Jesus would delight in reverence for the Father. And then one of the marks of one who has reverence for God and lives in constant reverence for God is that he will not judge by what his eyes see. And he will not make a decision by what his ears hear. This is so completely foreign and contrary to the race of Adam. I remember years ago, the Lord telling me how he said, all your life you have judged by what your eyes see and what your ears hear. Now I want to move you out of that realm into another realm, the realm of the Spirit, where you will not judge by what your eyes see or your ears hear, you will take in that information. We get a lot of information from our eyes and ears. It's not that we go around blind and deaf. We get information through our eyes and ears, but we don't come to a judgment merely on that information. That's the point here. Most human beings judge on the basis of what they've seen, they've heard. They say, I know. And I've seen in the church, I would say more than 90% of believers or 99% of believers have this evil habit of judging on the basis of what they've seen and what they've heard. And if you, my dear brothers and sisters, examine yourself, you'll find it is true. Even in your home, you judge by what your eyes see and what your ears hear, and very often it could be completely wrong. You could be judging your husband and judging your wife on the basis of something you saw and heard, and you may not know all the facts. How often we've all done that. And our failure in this area in the past, where we've discovered that we've judged wrongly and even perhaps hurt people sometimes, should make us humble ourselves, that say, Lord, I never want to judge by what my eyes see or my ears hear. I want to take in the information. I want to digest it. I want to take it before God. And I want God to give me discernment in this situation as to what I should say or what I should do. So it says here that Jesus would never judge by what his eyes see or his ears hear. I've often said how the sun rising and setting is one of the means by which God shows us every day. You can't trust your eyes. For many thousands of years, up till about 600 or 700 years ago, everybody in the world from the time of Adam felt that the sun was going around the earth, because that's what their eyes told them. Till somebody discovered 700 years ago in Europe, some scientists and astronomers, that that's not true. It's the earth rotating on its axis. But people could say, I don't see the earth moving. I don't feel the earth moving under my feet. You can't trust your feeling. You can't trust what you see. You can't even trust what you hear, because there are sounds above the frequency of the human ear that we cannot hear, but even dogs hear that. So all this is to show us, God is trying to humble us, saying, you can't trust what your eyes see or ears hear, even in the ordinary things of creation. How much more in spiritual things? It's good for us to humble ourselves and say, in many, many situations, I don't know. I don't have all the facts. And even when I have all the facts, I don't know the motives. So I will not judge by what my eyes see and what my ears hear. And it says here, but Jesus says in Isaiah 11:4, with righteousness, one day he will judge the poor, and with fairness. And if I want to judge with righteousness and fairness, I must begin with love. If I don't love, I cannot judge with righteousness and fairness.